Welcome back to NewsNation Live. The head of the private mercenary force that is fighting alongside Russian troops in Ukraine says he ordered troops back to Ukraine after leading an armed revolt against Russia. Yevgeny Prigozhin and his Wagner group began advancing toward Moscow on Friday, seeking to remove Russia's defense minister from power. They got within 120 miles of Moscow before Prigozhin halted his forces. Under a deal negotiated by the president of Belarus, Prigozhin has reportedly agreed to leave for that country with the promise that neither he nor his troops will be prosecuted. Joining me now is retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmit. Thank you, sir, for being here this morning.
Sure.
General Kimmit, where do we even begin with this? What does this mean for Vladimir Putin? We see what Prigozhin started to do and then didn't do. Is this part of a larger plan, or do you believe that something else could be afoot?
Look, I think what happened was Prigozhin finally got fed up with Putin. He started his march towards Moscow. He crossed the Rubicon. When he realized that no other officials inside the government were going to support him, the people were not flocking towards him, but instead everybody stood firm with Putin, I think he realized that he wasn't going to be successful. And potentially facing the Air Force and the helicopters of Vladimir Putin on that road, I think he took a deal.
General Kimmit, does that surprise you, though? Because Prigozhin is no neophyte in this. He understands how do you think he timed it at the wrong time? It was ill-timed, or overplayed his hand, or what?
I think he overplayed his hand. He probably got some indications from people inside the Russian government that they were as frustrated by this war as Prigozhin has been. And they probably made all sorts of, I'll stand by you, man, you can count on me, so on and so forth. But when push came to shove, they kept their mouths closed. And I think Prigozhin realized that he better take the deal or worse things were going to happen to him.
Well, could we see more challenges to Putin's authority? Do you think that this maybe is a chip in the armor or a warning sign to others?
I think it's both. It may be a chink in the armor. And you can certainly expect that Vladimir Putin will do everything he can to fill those chinks, to fill those gaps. I'm surprised that his defense minister is still in the job. I'm surprised that his chief of the military is still in the job. But this isn't over yet. I think what he's going to do is he's going to make some internal changes that we may never know about. But he knows he's weak, and he knows he needs to strengthen his position. Because when you're weak, people are going to try to take advantage of that. And he's got to do everything he can to prevent that from happening.
General Kimmit, that definitely led right into my next question for you, because this has to be an image problem for President Putin. And you and I both know that anytime something happens in the lower ranks, it is the chain of command that usually takes the hit. Hey, what happened down there with that private? Well, we need to know what happened. So there has to be some situation that changes with Putin's leadership structure if he was not made aware that this attempted coup was about to happen. So what do you see as being the reason or the person that stopped all of this from going forward?
Well, you as a veteran, you certainly understand exactly right. You've seen this before, that when things are going bad inside of an organization, when the leader is not effective, they're going to can him. And they're not only going to can him, but they're going to can a number of his subordinates and a number of the people to the left and right. However, that will start well below Putin. So I would expect at least the defense minister and the head of the military are probably a little concerned about their future employment opportunities. But I also think the Southern commander, the one down in Rostov-on-Don, who's in charge of this entire military operation, his job could be at peril, too, because, again, they're not making progress on the ground. And that lack of progress on the ground is what spurred Prigozhin to do this in the first place. So I think a lot of people need to be updating their LinkedIn right now, because they may not have a job in a couple of days.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.